Now, as reported by the Australian newspaper, Australia's foremost gender medicine expert and the lead author of the nation's guidelines on so-called gender-affirming care, Michelle Telfer, was heavily criticised by Family Court Judge Andrew Strum for giving misleading evidence in support of a mother who wanted her child to be prescribed puberty blockers. Now, this judgment has again called into question the integrity of treatment of gender-confused kids. Judge Andrew Strum, in this case, stripped the mother of custody and effectively blocked the 12-year-old from accessing these sort of gender treatments, but also criticised the Royal Children's Hospital here in Melbourne and its gender clinic. The Australian also reports that Justice Strum questioned the Australian standards of care and treatment guidelines for trans and gender diverse children and adolescents, authored by Professor Telfer, for not recognising children may not be capable of making life-altering medical decisions about their gender identity. He said it is concerning that an oddly binary approach is adopted in relation to children, especially of the age of the child, the subject of these proceedings, that is, to affirm unreservedly those who present with concerns regarding their gender, brooking no questioning thereof. He wrote in the judgment, the case of the mother is that because the child says so, the child is and must unquestionably be affirmed as being female in gender identity. However, that overlooks the obvious, namely that the child is still a child and not even if it matters a teenager. Joining me now is Women's Forum Australia's Head of Advocacy, Stephanie Bastiaan. Steph, everything I read there, the comments from the judge just seemed like pure common sense. But it's common sense we have not heard in the family court on these sort of issues. How significant is this case?
This is the most significant development so far. Michelle Telfer is the head of medicine at the Royal Children's Hospital. She is also, as you mentioned, the author of the so-called standards of care. And the judge has delivered a damning appraisal of her standards of care and the treatments. It's very clear that these treatments are not evidence-based, they are based on ideology. Children can't consent to these treatments. The side effects, which include things like infertility, cancer, damage to bone structure, are horrendous. They cannot consent, and quite often also children who are struggling with gender dysphoria also struggle with other comorbid mental health issues, including anxiety, depression, and autism. And arguably adults, young adults with these mental health issues also can't consent, which we will see. There's a case being run in the Supreme Court in Victoria with Mel Jeffries. We'll know where that sits in due time. But the fact of the matter is you're dealing with vulnerable people who cannot consent, and the treatments that they are being prescribed lack the evidence, which we know. This should be enough for Health Minister Mark Butler and Prime Minister Anthony Albanese to intervene immediately, to halt these treatments and to hold a national review rather than the soft approach that they're taking at the moment.
Well, if it wasn't for this case and this course of action being challenged in the courts, that 12-year-old child would be on puberty blockers right now. And again, how can a 12-year-old consent to that when the consequences can be quite serious? And when we know of so many cases where these gender treatments have had all sorts of medical consequences that the child would just have no understanding of at that age. Now, Nine newspapers columnist Peter Fitzsimons, the pirate, has declared shame on those who whip up hate against trans athletes for clicks and votes. This is an article he wrote recently where he said the nastiest and most ruthless purveyors of hate bait continually push out a catastrophically cliched warning that the sports world is awash with swarthy truck drivers wearing tutus and tights, storming and swarming their way through girls' changing rooms and fields to leer and sneer their way to every trophy going. The truth of the matter that we are talking about mostly just a handful of gentle souls with the extraordinary courage to live as what they believe is their true gender and want to be included in sport, doesn't rate as hate bait, so forget it. Your job is to whip it up. That's quite an amusing, unintentionally amusing little diatribe there, Stephanie, but I think the pirate is not happy with you, or me, it seems.
Look, I just hope female athletes aren't paying attention to this latest dribble from Pirate Pete. But it just shows how out of touch he is. He is a man telling women who are talking about their sex-based rights that they should be quiet to protect the feelings of these so-called trans athletes. A young woman from Victoria called into Ben Fordham's show this week, and she talked about her experience of being confronted with a trans athlete. And I want to share it because I think it's very relevant. But she's 5'4", he was 6'2", and she talked about being confronted with him in the change room and her fear of being crushed into the pavement in the event of an accident. And she talked about the fact that the violation that she felt when his body brushed against hers to block her from shooting a goal. She is representative of many girls around this country, and Pirate Pete has no concern or consideration for what these girls are going through. And it is absolutely ridiculous that he is so out of touch that he would mock these women and the very real plight that they are fighting, but also fighting to be able to speak in public about.
Well, this is, I think, what the consequence of this article is. Those of us who have been reporting on this, and I've been writing about it for a decade before it was a big issue, I'm not going to be silenced, but I do worry whether young girls, women who are competing in sports where there are men present, men who identify as women present, whether they're going to be discouraged from speaking because they're being called nasty and spreading hate bait and what other hyperbolic language the pirate used there. And that's really the effect of this activism from the left, is to silence women who are being impacted by these men.
Absolutely. And I think I'm fearful that that is the intent from Pete's article. He is trying to continue that culture of silencing people who oppose this ideology, and he will do it at all costs with no regard to the women and girls that he is impacting.
Absolutely. Stephanie, Bastiaan, thanks for your time.